We're talking about aggregate demand and aggregate supply. So this is the concept which gets introduced here. So aggregate demand means is the aggregate demand is the total demand of goods and services within an economy. For example, real GDP. Aggregate supply is the supply of total goods and services by firms in an economy. And where it crosses the all three will be long run equilibrium. So to understand why, now we'll come into why is the aggregate demand curve sloping. Look at the aggregate demand curve. These levels. The concept we have looked at this is the quantitative theory of money. So MV is equal to PY. PY we are looking at the nominal GDP or nominal output. Supply for real money balances. M by P to the top D is demand for real money balances. K is 1 by V, which is inverse of velocity. So in this function, velocity is stable. We'll be looking when we keep velocity as fixed, we look at the different variables. So whenever we are talking about, we see that the aggregate demand is inversely proportional to the price level. For real money balances, the quantity of, so demand for real money balances, inflation rate which I talked about, nominal interest rate, basically it's the interest rates you will be getting in banks, and Y is the output. So demand for real money balances is actually positive related to Y. As Y increases, so does the demand for real money balances, where it's inversely proportional to I. So that as the output increases, the decrease, so will be the increase in demand for real money balances. It is ultimately inversely related to P. As the price levels go down, demand would increase because P is in the denominator. MV is equal to PY. Now let's say if I keep velocity as fixed, so M is the money supply. As I change money supply, I will the nominal output change, which output is basically a relation of quantity of money supply. So when I decrease the money supply, we've seen the curve would shift to the left. Increase the money supply, it will be the curve will be shifting to the right. So just to give you a fair idea how this is being used. So when we are looking at PY, it is in nominal terms, not in real terms. Basically, it's an increase in the price level. Aggregate demand curve. So this is the original curve. Any change in the demand would lead to increase. It will shift the curve up. We'll see the price changing from P1 to P2. Aggregate demand has gone from AD to AD1. Although price has moved from one place to another, there has been no change in the output. So in the long run, we have seen that the output is fixed. In aggregate demand would change the price level but not affect the output. Since it's not going to affect the output, it does not affect the employment rate. It's at the natural employment rate.
I'm going to be talking about shocks to the economy. There are two types of shocks to the economy. One is a demand shock and a supply shock. In demand shock, I'm going to be taking two examples, and in a supply shock, I'll be talking basically about one of the examples. Now, if I look at deliberate supply shocks, what I'm trying to say is that taxation and policy interventions are type of shocks. Now we look at the demand shock. I talked about digital payments, which is a very good invention in recent times. It's more akin to credit card. Digital payment system, the invention of digital payment system has increased the velocity of money. Increasing the velocity of money supply within an economy increases the nominal output if I keep this money supply within an economy as constant. Increase in the money spending leads to an increase in the demand. It shifts upwards, outwards, you would say, from AD1 to AD2. Now we have a point A, point B, and point C. So it moves, the economy now moves over a period of time for a shorter duration from point A to point B, and then it transits back again to point C. We'll be discussing how this transition happens. We'll look at the money supply quantity equation. Keep money supply as constant. An increase in the velocity leads to a nominal increase in the output, which is Py. The economy goes from A to point B temporarily. This is an expansion phase. Now at point B, the output is more than the natural output. There will be more recruitment of people, more investment. This ultimately leads to increase in the price levels. An increase in the price levels would actually shoot up the wages of the employees. The economy goes back to point C. Increase in the price level, which is why Y is constant. We say the output is constant. At C, there is the demand for the output reduces. So this is a very good example of how the economy transits from point A to point B, which is a temporary transition. So this is a brief expansion phase, and ultimately it comes back to the natural output, or which is at the natural employment rate, which is known as full employment. Say a full employment doesn't mean that 100% of the labor force who wants to get employed is employed. I'm talking about the second demand shock. In this, we are talking about a recession. So during a recession, the demand for goods and services reduce, it drags down the consumption and investment. Reduction in the credit within an economy reduces the money supply. A reduction in the money supply would actually again reduce nominal output, and the aggregate demand curve shifts inwards, goes from AD to AD2. Now, this is a brief transition period. Now, this is predominantly a recessionary period where the output would drop to point B and then it will go to point C. In this period of time, the firm would not be employing, it will not be investing, and as a matter of fact will drag down, as the price levels drop down, it will drag down the wages, and ultimately it will come to the equilibrium with the natural growth, which is output at point C. So at point C, the quantity demanded increases over a period of time. The output remains constant. In this case, this is a brief transition from A to B and from B to C. This transition, which goes down where the economy, goes, the output falls and then it comes to the natural equilibrium, is sort of the recessionary phase. Talking about now shocks to aggregate supply. So I'm talking about here an adverse shock. This is just a very simple example of what a famine could do to a country. Now, in case of a severe famine in a small economy, it could result in extreme shortages of food, and this would ultimately give a lot of pressure not only on the cost of food but ultimately on the output. What it will do over a shorter period of time, the curve shifts from A, the output now drops to point B. Output actually reduces. So this is an example of how the output reduces from point A to point B. The price levels of the economy go up.
The takeaways when you look at today is that when you look at aggregate demand in the long run, it's going to impact the price level, but it has no impact on the output and the employment at the natural level. Whereas in the short run, it is actually going to impact employment and output. As the output reduces, of course, the employment rate would, the unemployment rate would actually go up, but not the prices. And when you're looking at aggregate supply, in the long run, I talked about it's actually affected by the production function and the factors of reduction or of factors of production, which is basically the amount of capital and labor and the level of technology, how the technology is efficiently using these two factors of inputs. Wherever in the long run you're looking at, the aggregate supply curve is horizontal with wages and prices are predetermined. This is to fair idea we have seen through basically graphs how this works out. Advancement usually in technology will drive the productivity higher. A rise in the productivity will lead to higher wages and wage growth.